N. The first thing Rhett said when he took the microphone wasn't loud. He didn't tap the glass, didn't clear his throat for attention. He just stood up from his chair at the sweetheart table, and something about the way he moved made the whole room go still before he even opened his mouth. 212 people were seated in that ballroom in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of venue that feels like someone took a mountain and taught it to be elegant. Exposed beams, warm Edison lighting, wild flowers in mason jars that our florist had driven 4 hours to arrange. Champagne was already on the tables. The band was tooting softly in the corner. My cheeks hurt from smiling because, for the past 6 hours, despite everything, I had been genuinely smiling. Rhett looked out at the room. Then he looked at me. And I knew. "Before we get into the toasts tonight," he said, his voice unhurried, the way he sounds when he's already done all the thinking and the only thing left is to say the words, "There are a few things that the people in this room deserve to understand." My hands folded in my lap, my rings pressed into my fingers. I'm Vivian. I'm 28 years old. I'm a high school English teacher in a small district outside Asheville, which means I spend my days helping other people's kids find the words for things they can't quite say out loud. The irony of that is not lost on me. I am very good at helping other people find their voice. I spent most of my life not knowing I was allowed to have one. Growing up, there were 2 children in my family, me and my brother Cole, who was 4 years older and has always existed in a slightly different atmosphere than the rest of us. Warmer, more pressurized, more oxygen. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it the way you describe weather. It just was what it was. My parents ran a mid-sized landscaping and property management company that my father had built from a single truck and a lot of stubbornness. By the time Cole and I were teenagers, it was a real business. Good reputation, steady contracts, a small office downtown. My father talked about it the way other people talk about their children, with that particular pride that doesn't quite have room for anything else. Cole was going to run it one day. That was decided before I ever understood what decided meant. I was going to do something stable and quiet. Teach. Marry someone sensible. Not need very much. And for a long time, I thought that was fine. I thought I was fine. I thought I was fine. I thought fine was the same as happy. I met Rhett at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 24. He was a structural engineer, which I thought sounded stiff until I learned that what it actually means is that he spends his days figuring out what things are made of and whether they'll hold. He turned out to be the same in conversation. He'd listen to you for a while and then ask the one question you hadn't thought to ask yourself. On our 3rd date, he asked me, very calmly, "Do you always apologize before you say what you think?" I stared at him. "I don't do that," I said. He raised one eyebrow. I thought about it. I did that. We got engaged 2.5 years later. I called my mother first, standing in the parking lot of the restaurant where Rhett had proposed, still wearing the earrings I'd put on because I thought maybe tonight might be the night. She said, "Oh, that's wonderful," in a voice that meant she was already calculating something. She asked about timing. I told her we were thinking late May the following year. "That gives us so much time to plan," she said, and there was something in the way she said us that I didn't examine closely enough. We booked the venue 4 days after the engagement, signed the contract, paid the deposit, sent save the dates within the month. I built a shared planning folder that had tabs for vendors, timeline, guest list, dietary restrictions, and a running budget with color-coded categories. Rhett called it aggressive. I called it not wanting anything to go wrong. My mother was involved in a way that felt, at first, like love. She sent me links to florists. She had opinions about chair styles. She and I drove out to the venue together on a Tuesday in October and stood on the terrace and she said, "Vivian, this is exactly what you deserve." I remember thinking how rarely she said things like that and how much I wanted to believe she meant it. Cole had no opinions about any of it. He was traveling. He did that a lot, took long trips funded by a combination of his salary from the family business and what I had always assumed was very good budgeting on his part. He was in Colorado that fall, doing something involving motorcycles and a group of guys he'd known since college. My parents talked about it the way they talked about all of Cole's adventures, with a kind of reverent amusement, like he was a force of nature. You just watch and appreciate. Then February came. 7 months before the wedding. My mother called on a Wednesday evening, and her voice had that particular brightness that I had learned in 30 years of being her daughter meant she had already decided the shape of the conversation and was just waiting for me to walk into it. So, she said, Cole found something, I repeated, a property, this incredible piece of land about 40 minutes outside of town. He wants to build a venue space on it. Events, weddings, corporate retreats. You know how he's always had that vision. She said vision the way some people say chosen, reverent, a little hushed. He put in an offer. I waited because I knew that was not the full sentence. The thing is, she said, and here her voice softened into something that was meant to sound apologetic but didn't quite land. The financing is a little complicated. He needs to show liquidity. There's this window. The offer expires in 2 weeks, and your father and I thought, Mom, that since the timing works out and your wedding is still months away, we could redirect the gift we were setting aside for you and put it toward Cole's mom. She stopped. What gift? I asked. A pause. We've been setting aside money for your wedding since you were in college. Did you not know that? I did not know that. I had never been shown a number, never been told what it was, never been given any documentation or access or even a clear sense of what it was intended to cover. I had assumed my parents would help in some way. I had not assumed there was a specific fund. How much? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Vivian, the point is, how much, Mum? She told me. $54,000. I sat very still at my kitchen table. Rhett was in the other room. I could hear the low sound of a baseball game on television. I felt the number land in me the way heavy things land. Not a crash, more like the slow sinking of a stone through water. We'd pay you back, my mother said. Of course we would. Cole's business plan is very solid. Your father looked it over. When would you pay it back? Once the venue is up and running. A year, maybe 2. My wedding is in 7 months. You've already paid the big deposits, she said, and I could hear her shifting into reasonable mode, the register she used when she wanted to frame something irrational as obvious. The rest can be managed. You and Rhett are both working. You're financially responsible. You don't need it the way Cole needs it right now. I want to be very honest about what happened next, because I've thought about it a lot. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said, I need to think about this, and I hung up. Then I sat at that kitchen table for a long time while the baseball game played in the other room, and I thought about the word need. I thought about how, in my family, need was always measured against Cole's need. His need was always larger. His need was always more urgent, more vivid, more real. And my need, even when it was my own wedding, was always something that could wait, or flex, or quietly disappear. I told Rhett that night. He listened the way he always does, completely still, asking nothing until I was done. Then he was quiet for a moment. Do you have anything in writing? He asked. About this fund? I thought about it. There were some old emails. My mother had mentioned it once or twice over the years in the vague way you mention future things you expect to materialize eventually. Nothing formal, I said. No account statements. Nothing with my name on it. Rhett nodded once slowly. Okay, he said. That single okay carried a lot of weight. I would understand why later. I called my parents back the next day and told them no. I wasn't redirecting anything. The money that had been set aside for my wedding needed to be used for my wedding. Cole could find other financing. There were banks, there were investors, there was the salary he'd been drawing from the family company for 6 years. My father called an hour after that. He didn't ease in. You're being short-sighted, he said. This is a family opportunity. My wedding is also a family occasion, I said. Cole has a time-sensitive situation. His voice had that controlled edge it got when he wanted me to understand that the discussion was already over and I was only holding things up. He needs the capital now. You have time. I don't have time. I have 7 months and a contract with a venue and 200 invitations that have already gone out. You're making this about you. I almost laughed. It is about me. It's my wedding. His exhale was slow and deliberate. The exhale of a man who has decided you are being difficult. Your brother has built something real. He needs support. That's what families do. I would love to support Cole. I'm not giving him my wedding fund to do it. There was a pause, and in the silence I felt something familiar, that specific chill that my father's silences had always carried. Then he said, "Fine, if that's how you want to be about it." Another pause. "Don't be surprised if your priorities become ours." I asked what that meant. He hung up. I found out what it meant over the following weeks in pieces. My mother stopped responding to the planning folder. She declined a vendor meeting she had previously committed to. When I called, she was polite in a way that was colder than rudeness, perfectly grammatical, no real warmth, the conversational equivalent of a form letter. My father didn't call at all. "Cole texted me once, just so you know this is really hurting them." I stared at the text and then put my phone face down on the counter. Meanwhile, Rhett got quiet in the way that I had come to recognize meant he was working on something. He asked me a lot of questions I thought were odd at the time. He wanted copies of everything, old emails from my mother mentioning the fund, a card she'd sent me years ago that referenced what we've been putting away for your big day, a text from my father from the year before that mentioned he'd spoken to their financial advisor about Vivian's account. I dug all of it up without fully understanding why and handed it to him like pieces of something I couldn't see the shape of yet. 3 weeks before the wedding, he sat down at our kitchen table with his laptop and said, "Come look at this." The fund had not just been redirected, it had been transferred. 6 weeks earlier, before my mother had even called me about Cole's property, before the conversation had happened at all, $54,000 had moved from an account structured in my name as beneficiary into an LLC registered to Cole. The transfer memo said investment contribution. I read the document 3 times. My eyes kept sliding off it. "They transferred it before they asked me," I said. Rhett nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. There was something particular about that detail that I keep coming back to even now. The ask, "Maybe we can redirect," hadn't been a question at all. They had already done it. They were just telling me after the fact, framing it as a conversation we were having together, when really they had already decided and the only question was how long it would take me to accept it. I found the other thing the following week. Rhett had kept looking, the way he does, methodical, without emotion, just following the paper where it led. There was an email chain. Cole had written to my father 2 months before the transfer, "What about Viv's wedding account? She doesn't really track it anyway. If we move it now, there's time to build it back before she notices." My father had replied with 2 words, "I'll handle it." I read those words in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning with a cup of coffee going cold next to me. She doesn't really track it anyway. I had trusted them. That was the thing. Not naively, not blindly. I had trusted them the way you trust the floor to be there when you step. You don't verify the floor every morning. You just assume it holds. I met Cole for lunch the week before the wedding. Not at my parents' house. A restaurant downtown, the kind with good light and no privacy, which I chose deliberately. He arrived 5 minutes late and kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine, which told me he didn't know about the email or didn't think I did. "I know about the transfer," I said before we had even ordered. He went still. Then, "Viv, I know it happened before Mom called me. I know about your email to Dad." His jaw tightened. "You went digging. I went looking for what was mine. It was a family decision. It was my money. It was a fund that Mom and Dad managed. They had discretion over how it was used. It was set aside for me." Cole leaned back. He has this way of expanding when he's cornered, physically taking up more space, like a slow exhale into authority. "Viv, you're going to be fine. You and Rhett are both employed. You're not struggling. I had a window, and I needed the capital, and I'll pay it back. It's not like they stole from you." I looked at him for a long moment. "Cole, what do you think stealing is?" He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm asking. Because the money was designated for me. You knew that. You told Dad to move it before I could notice. What would you call that?" He picked up his menu. "I'd call it a family helping a family member." "Which family member?" He didn't answer that. I didn't finish my lunch. I left money on the table for my half, said, "I'll see you at the wedding," and walked out. The air outside was cool, and I stood on the sidewalk for a second and breathed it. Something had shifted in me somewhere in that conversation. Not anger exactly. I had moved through the anger. Something quieter and more permanent. The end of a long, long pretending. Rhett and I had already talked to an attorney. Quietly, practically, the way we do most things. The attorney was direct. The fund structure, combined with the documentation we had, gave us grounds for a civil claim. It wasn't airtight, but it had teeth. She drafted a demand letter and told us to say the word when we were ready. The week before the wedding, my parents called. My mother first. She wanted to talk about all of this, which was her way of describing the situation without naming it. She said she missed me. She said she hoped we could put things aside for the sake of the day. She said, "You only get one wedding, Vivian." I said, "I know, so let's not let it be ruined by all this tension." "I'm not tense," I said. "I'm clear." She was quiet. "I'll see you on Saturday," I said, and hung up. My father called that evening. He said, "Your mother and I will be there. We expect you to behave like an adult." I said, "I'll see you Saturday," and hung up. They came. Of course they came. They sat in the second row with their shoulders straight and their expressions arranged, and my mother cried at appropriate moments during the ceremony, the way she always cried at appropriate moments, correctly, precisely, the way she did most things. Cole stood in the back with a girlfriend I'd met twice. The ceremony was at 4 o'clock, golden hour light coming through the tall windows, and when the officiant got to the vows, I looked at Rhett, and I felt the specific peace of being seen by someone who chose to see you. We said "I do." The room applauded. My father shook Rhett's hand with a firm grip that was meant to communicate something. My mother hugged me, and her perfume was the same as it had always been, and for a second I felt 6 years old in a way that hurt somewhere specific. At dinner, my maid of honor gave a speech that made everyone cry. Rhett's best man made everyone laugh. The band played. People danced. I ate my food and talked to cousins I hadn't seen in 2 years and thanked everyone for coming and smiled until my face remembered how to mean it. And then Rhett stood up. He didn't ask the band to stop. He didn't clink his glass. He just rose from his chair and picked up the cordless microphone from the table where the MC had left it, and the room, which had been warm and buzzing, started to quiet one table at a time, the way silence spreads when it has something behind it. "I want to say a few things," he said, "and I'd ask everyone to stay with me, because this matters." My mother's head turned. My father's hand tightened slightly on his champagne flute. I could see it from where I was sitting. "Most of you know Vivian," Rhett said. "You know she's thoughtful, that she's careful, that she plans things well and holds them together and doesn't ask for much. What you might not know, what I didn't fully understand until recently, is how much of that is learned behavior." Someone at table 6 set down a fork, softly, but you could hear it. "Vivian's family set aside money for her wedding," Rhett continued. "Over the years, her parents put together $54,000 in a fund that was structured in her name, intended for this day. He let that land. 2 months before they told her about it, that money was transferred to an LLC belonging to her brother. Before she was asked. Before she was told. After her brother suggested in an email that she wouldn't notice because she doesn't track things closely. The room was so still it had a texture. Rhett reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced 2 sheets of paper. He didn't make a show of it. He just held them up. "I have the transfer documentation. I have the email. And I have a demand letter that our attorney sent out 3 days ago, which my wife has chosen not to discuss publicly, but which I am choosing to discuss tonight because 212 people watched her stand up here and be married without her parents acknowledging what was done to her. And I think you all deserve to know why the people who should be happiest tonight are instead sitting in this room looking like they're waiting for something to go away." In the silence, someone coughed and then stopped as if they regretted the interruption. Rhett lowered the pages. He looked at me, just for a second. Steady, careful, the look he gives me when something is hard and he wants me to know he's not going anywhere. "Vivian didn't make a scene," he said. "She didn't beg and she didn't threaten. She just decided this wedding was going to happen on its date and in its way, and she let the rest of it be what it was going to be. I am in awe of that. I've been in awe of that since the moment she told me." He paused. "But I'm an engineer. And what I do is look at structures and ask whether they'll hold. And I want the people who did this to her to understand, in front of everyone she loves, that we see the structure, we know what it is, and it will not hold. He set the microphone back on the table. The room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It did something I hadn't expected. It exhaled. 212 people breathing out at once, like they'd all been holding something and now, finally, they could set it down. I felt it in my chest. Not relief, exactly. Something bigger and less comfortable. The sensation of having been hidden your whole life and then, in a single moment, becoming visible. My mother left before dessert. My father followed her. Cole was gone before the band's second set. I didn't watch them go. I was on the dance floor with my maid of honor, and the lights were low and the music was something with a good bass line, and somewhere in the middle of that song I started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because my body didn't know what else to do with the amount of feeling it contained. The demand letter had already gone out. That part was done. Our attorney had been clear about the timeline, the documentation, the realistic range of outcomes. It wasn't dramatic, it was paperwork. It was Rhett sitting at a desk, being methodical, the way he always is, following a problem to its edges. The money came back. Not quickly, not gracefully. There were 3 weeks of my mother calling and my father emailing and Cole sending texts that were masterclasses in saying a lot without taking responsibility for anything. My mother said we had humiliated her. My father said we had turned family business into a public performance. Cole said I had always made everything about myself. I read each message carefully. I responded to the legal correspondence and let our attorney handle the rest. The fund was repaid. The legal agreement specified that it could not be touched by anyone other than me going forward. Our attorney put teeth in the language because she is very good at her job and because she understood from our one meeting exactly what we were dealing with. I haven't spoken to Cole since. I speak to my parents occasionally. We're in the same city. We have family things, Thanksgivings that exist at a polite and careful distance. My mother does not bring up the wedding. My father does not bring up the money. We operate in a kind of civil cordiality that is not warmth and is not war, and is, honestly, the most honest version of our relationship I've ever experienced. Some people have asked me if I regret it, if Rhett speaking that night made things worse, or closed doors that could have been left open. I think about how to answer that, and I keep coming back to the same thing. Those doors weren't open. I had just been standing in front of them my whole life, pretending the wall was a door because it was easier than understanding what a wall meant. There's a photo from our wedding night. Rhett took it on his phone. No filter. Not for anyone but us. I'm standing on the venue's terrace after the reception, shoes off, the mountains dark in the distance, laughing at something he said that I can't even remember now. I don't look like someone who had a complicated night. I look like someone who just put something down, something heavy she'd been carrying for so long she'd stopped noticing the weight. I keep that photo on my phone. I don't have to keep explaining myself to people who benefit from not understanding me. I don't have to earn my place in rooms I walked into as an equal. I don't have to make myself smaller so someone else's version of the story has room to stand up. Rhett says I knew all of this before he said a word in that ballroom, that the speech wasn't news to me. It was just the first time someone said it where other people could hear. He's right. He usually is. It's one of his more irritating qualities. But I think there's something about being seen in public by the people who know you that does something nothing private can do. Because for 30 years I had been invisible in my own family, and in 30 seconds Rhett made me visible to 212 people who were watching. That's not nothing, that's everything. I used to think the hardest part of what happened was the money. $54,000 is not an abstract number, it has weight. It represents years of someone setting something aside, building it slowly, attaching your name to it, and then deciding quietly, behind a closed door, that your name didn't actually mean what you thought it meant. But the money wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was understanding that the transfer had already happened before my mother called me, that the conversation she framed as a question, maybe we can redirect, was never a question at all. The decision had been made. I was just being informed gently in the hope that I would accept it the way I had accepted everything else, quietly, gracefully, without making it a thing. I had spent so many years not making things a thing. What I've come to understand, not easily, not quickly, is that people who take from you don't usually think of it as taking. Cole genuinely believed he needed it more than I did. My parents genuinely believed they were managing a family resource wisely. None of them sat in a room and said, "Let's hurt Vivian." They just didn't think of me as someone whose needs required much protection, and that's its own kind of answer about how much of myself I had made visible to them over the years. There's a cause and an effect to how families like mine operate. When you consistently shrink, when you make yourself easy, undemanding, grateful for whatever is offered, you don't earn more love. You just teach people what they can expect from you, and eventually what they expect from you is that you'll make room, that you'll adjust, that your plans are softer than other people's plans. Cole wrote she doesn't track it anyway because he had 30 years of evidence that I didn't push back. That evidence was the cause. The transfer was the effect. Rechanging that. Standing up in that ballroom with documentation in his jacket pocket and saying out loud in front of 212 people what had been done wasn't dramatic, it was structural. He is an engineer. He looked at the situation and he understood that private conversations with people who don't negotiate in good faith are just opportunities for those people to buy more time. The only thing that actually changes the structure is making it visible. So he made it visible. I think about what it took to get there. Not his courage, though that mattered, but mine. It took me trusting him enough to hand over every old email and half-forgotten document without fully knowing why. It took me sitting across from Cole at a restaurant and asking the question I already knew the answer to, not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed to stop pretending I didn't see what I saw. It took me understanding that the version of loyalty my family had always asked for, the kind where you protect the peace by absorbing the cost, was not actually loyalty. It was just a system that worked very well for everyone except me. Integrity doesn't mean being loud. It means being honest about what you see, even when it's inconvenient, even when it fractures something you spent your whole life trying to hold together. Rhett has that. I had to grow into it. I'm still growing into it. But I have the photo. Shoes off. Mountains behind me, laughing at something I can't remember. That's enough.